Yeah.
And I'm imagining the initial awakening is probably the first time you realize that you weren't the conceptual sense of self that you always were. And I assume that the big thing in 2011 is what people refer to as liberation. And I was wondering, how did your first glimpse of awakening affect the deconditioning of, I guess, emotional reactivity that in you? And like, how can you use like that first glimpse, if you're wondering if you've had it, to maybe accelerate the deconditioning? Yeah. And at what point? I assume liberation is when you thoroughly deconditioned a lot of emotional reactivity, so you experience the total freedom. Yeah. Is that a correct understanding?
Well, to me, I don't call it liberation, I just call it awakening, because, yeah, I think I used to more call it liberation or something, but now I just call it awakening. That thing that happened in Bali. And yeah, I think that there had been a lot of deconditioning, like you say. So my reactivity was a lot lower. There was still reactivity in there, but it was a lot lower, and my personality was becoming a lot more stable, although it could have big bursts of suffering every so often. But that was in quite extreme situations. But for less extreme situations, my reactivity was a lot less. There was a lot less belief in thought, in imagination, in feelings, in stories. You're right, there is lots of previous awakenings that happen. For me, I would say most probably the first awakening that I remember was when I didn't know anything about non-duality, and it was in childhood, and I did this thing where I started listening to music. I've spoken about this before, and I started listening to music, and I imagined being loved. So I imagined having a partner and being really immensely loved, like to such an extreme detail. And when I would do this, I would then begin to feel love. So I'd have these extreme feelings of love, and it would get so extreme that I would eventually pop, and I would just feel love, and I didn't need to imagine the partner anymore. So it would just be love there. And that had quite a profound effect on me. And then when I think that I heard being present from the Buddhists, I think that it was like, that's what I was hearing, was those experiences that I had in childhood of imagining being loved. And when they spoke about being present, there was some sort of like resonance with that, but I couldn't put that all together in my brain at the time. Like that wasn't until later that I began to remember these things. And then throughout my 20s, there were lots of intellectual realizations, which I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have had, and lots of energetic awakenings, like the seeing of no self. So some people that's really profound. For me, it wasn't so profound, the seeing of no self. What was actually more profound was seeing that there was a consciousness that was looking. Like I remember, there's like many levels to it. And then there was this moment where I was listening to Adyashanti, I think, and walking in the forest. And he said something like, God is looking through your eyes. And then I just had this like profound sensation of this looking that wasn't Lisa, that was absolutely impersonal. And it felt really expansive and big. And it was shocking. And it felt also really beautiful. Like, yeah. So it was that. And then there was opposite ones where there was like this nothingness, like waking up and there was nothing, no world, no anything. So all these different awakenings, I'm sure everyone can relate to it. And I think that they have great impact on the apparent spiritual path. You start off maybe in looking at the psychology, or you start off maybe meditating, and then it's like everything, it's the nature of everything is to expand. So you keep expanding and like crossing those boundaries, what does this mean, or what does that mean? And you keep asking questions. Like, I mean, even when I was practicing Buddhism and they were teaching mindfulness, you know, there were still mantras that were chanting that all sensation, everything is illusion. You know, so then you begin to question that, you know, it stays in your mind, and then you have all these big and little shifts that happen. And I wouldn't focus on the end, you know, like on this big awakening, on this big shift. I would focus more on the fascination of your own experience, you know, like what is happening in your experience. So rather than focusing on what can get me to this big end, it's like what is happening in your experience now. This is the fascinating point. This is where the exploration is. Like, what am I feeling now? Where is my looking now? What do I want now? What are my games? Like, what am I playing? What is looking? Am I as Terence looking, or is there a looking at Terence? Is there anything happening, or is there nothing happening now? So it's just forget like about this awakening that Lisa had and this awakening that everybody's wanting, and just concentrate on the absolute mystery of the current experience, because that's where you'll find all the answers, is this current experience. It's fascinating, and it's so deep and endless. It's like the personality and the psychology is like a fractal. It goes on endlessly. You'll never get to the bottom of the psychology, but it's like you say, there is a reduction, and there's these awakenings and a smoothing out and a soothing out, and then a permanent shift happens where there's no longer a character looking. The character is being experienced.
I see. The reason I'm asking, because you, as well as several other non-dual teachers, often refer to, I guess, what you're calling an energetic shift.
Yeah.
And I guess energy is sort of a term that gets used very loosely and is never really clearly defined by anybody.
Yeah.
But I interpret this quote-unquote energy as sort of the tingling sensations that you feel in the body. And initially you might feel them as coursing through your body, like maybe similar to the way blood is sort of flowing through your body. And I never experienced these things before. I started doing like internal body scan meditations, but once I started doing that, it seems to have opened that up. And I noticed those seem to, and I assume this is what people call Kundalini or Qi, and if you're following the Chinese system, but they seem very related to actual contractions in the body, like I'm talking like actual literal muscular contractions in the body. And so now kind of when I'm focusing on present moment experience, I guess since I guess like you, I think I've experienced a lot of early childhood trauma, and these sorts of energetic sensations seem to be particularly strong in people who have that in their background. And as I've practiced feeling into the contractions, I've noticed shifting pattern, and I do get like violent physical reactions and things like that. But as I've done that repeatedly, the way I experience the flow of this quote unquote energetic sensations has changed quite a bit. And I notice as those sensations, the flow of those sensations change, it seems somehow correlated to the sense of self also. And so the reason I guess I'm a little bit hung up on it, because it seems like at awakening, these contractions open up and release. And that's really what I'm hoping to happen, because once I guess I had cut off myself from feeling these sensations all my life. But now that I've trained myself to pay attention to them, they're very strong and constantly there and uncomfortable.
Right.
And I just have to sense into them briefly, and my breath rate shoots. I can tell my whole autonomic nervous system is fired up, and but I think gradually, as that has come down, sense of self is changing, and I was wondering if, from your experience, you might have any tips on how I might focus attention in such a way that I could accelerate this deconditioning process. Like I imagine those physical muscular contractions are related to some old trauma that I don't even remember, because I don't have any mental images that come up when this happens. And so I was wondering, what you've experienced, and maybe what tips you might have for people looking to decondition these patterns.
Yeah, it's really amazing, when people begin to go inwards and they realize how uncomfortable the body's been. But they don't realize that the body's been very uncomfortable, but they've cut it off through really cutting off the experience of the body and just being in the head. And then also I think a lot of people numb themselves through alcohol or drugs. Like I think, a lot of people drink alcohol every evening to settle it down and to disassociate more from it. So when you begin to go inward, these experiences can be really, really strong. And all these things can help, like Tai Chi, acupressure, acupuncture, meditation. There's also people keep telling me, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a practice which helps a lot with the release of emotions. It's called TRE, I think. But people have been writing to me a lot about it, so I have to investigate. So there's all these different things that you can do to settle down the system. And I think it's great that you're open to it. But for me to diagnose it and to try to help you or guide you in a way in this conversation is just, it would be irresponsible of me, because there could be lots of things in play. Like if I were working with you more one-to-one, we would explore health, because your physical health can affect the way the body feels and these energies, like the practices that you're doing every day, the relationships that you're in, all these different, your job, your relationship with your job, all these different things can have a play on what's happening in that experience. So I would say that it sounds like you're doing a phenomenal job alone by yourself, and you can reach out and book one-to-one sessions with people to get a deeper, in-depth look at it. But I would also carry on with what you're doing, keep exploring what's happening, and looking into these new practices or these different practices and seeing gently what works. And this shift is going to happen for everyone. It's just a matter of time. But also time doesn't exist. That freedom is the only thing, the only ending that it can be. And really the end is right here as well.
I see. And when you say the shift will happen for everyone, did you say that because everyone dies and the shift happens before death?
Everybody dies, but I presume that there's also next lives as well. So I presume there's many, many lives which have led you to this point where you are now, but they're just not your lives. I assume, but I don't know. All of these things in the end, I don't know. What I do know in the end is that right now there is a looking that's happening. So there is somebody in Terence that's asking questions and wanting this dream to end, or the difficult sensation to end, or wanting to have an energetic shift. And there is something that's looking at it, which is perfectly still and in all things and no things. And then there is this love, its companion, this love side to it as well, this I am. And that's what I really know. That is without question, without doubt. But everything else in life, like there is, exceptions all the time. The advice that I would give most readily and most easily in this situation is to keep putting your attention back in the I am, or at the empty looking, and then explore the psychology, and that's something, and the energy of the body, and the, you know, and what's happening in the body, and that's something you're already doing. But then a more detailed recommendation, I would be reluctant to commit to anything.
I see. I guess I've always I've struggled to relate to the emptiness and stillness because of the strong bodily sensations.
Yeah.
Because when I zoom out from that, there's all this turbulence that's happening in the body,
Yeah.
and that is part of the experience.
Yeah.
And so when I lose the quote unquote sense of self, of being a personal self, there's still, so basically there's just everything coming in from the sense,
Yeah.
from the senses,
Yeah,
and
and
no
that,
you.
yeah.
But that includes violent internal sensations. So
Yeah.
there's no stillness, there's no emptiness, there's just this, and I'm not here, but it's not still, and it's not peace.
Yeah.
but
there's
no me.
Yeah, there is. That's really sweet that that's being recognized, that there is no you. There is a stillness and a peace that's there as well, but it's just that there is still energy that's involved in that turbulent storm, and that's why the recommendation of calming down that storm is like a really good recommendation, because it's just that the attention is focused in on the storm and the discomfort, which is obvious that that's going to happen. And then there'll be moments when that's not so strong, and there is this expansiveness that's there, that's empty and free and looking through you now and not identified with anything.
So, but you think it is possible to recognize the peace and stillness even in the midst of very turbulent and violent physical bodily sensations?
Yes.
So you can.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happened.
That's not necessarily a disqualifier.
No, that's what happened with Eckhart Tolle.
That is what I struggle with.
Yeah, that's what happened with Eckhart Tolle. Is that Eckhart Tolle's story is that he was in absolute hell, and I think also Byron Katie. So those aren't precluders. There is some form of surrender that happened in both cases.
But my understanding is when that big shift happened, though, that I assume, and this could be a wrong assumption, I assume that those violent sensations suddenly calmed down for them.
Could be.
But I could be wrong, but that's what I thought was implied, that he was suicidal, going crazy, and then boom, he had the big thing. And I think, like for Eckhart Tolle, when he woke up, it was just peace. But I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, because I've not been in everybody's experience or done like a scientific experiment to see how this manifests in everybody else. One thing that I do know is that when I commit to something too strongly, I normally get contradicted. Like, so I don't know in the end. Like, there's a good chance, but who knows? So I would go more the other way now and just look, because we can't say a certainty. I would say now, look at that part in you which is hoping that those feelings will go away, and kind of include that person or that part of that person that's looking and hoping that these really violent, difficult sensations will go away, and that energy is really allowed here. Like, really bring it into experience and see that energy pops up, and then starts imagining the future and imagining when these experiences are going to go away, and notice that there's something that's experiencing that. So that energy of the one that's hoping that these feelings will go away is appearing in experiencing. It's not the experiencer. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it. Anything that's seen in this world isn't the experiencer. You could also say is the experiencer, but that's we're just pointing backwards at the moment. But it isn't the experiencer. The experiencer is only experiencing. The thought that energy that's saying, I'm hoping that in the future this will stop, that's being witnessed. There's something that knows that's appearing in consciousness. That entity, that thought isn't inherently awake. Something is watching that. That's a play coming in this, and it's just noticing that there is a watching of that.
But the watching isn't separate from the experience itself. So there is no separate experiencer from the experience. So part of the experience is violent sensations, then the watching is also violent sensation.
It's also still and empty and nothing.
I'll try to explore that more.
Yeah.
That's the part I'm having difficulty connecting to.
Yeah.
In the midst of those sensations. But
that's why I was trying to go backwards to what can sometimes happen. So part of the awakenings is that you can have this separation where the consciousness separates out from the experience, and that's an experience in itself. But in that, then it becomes really clear the emptiness and the stillness and the nothingness in the experience. There's all these different things that can seemingly happen, and they all chop away at different parts of the illusion. But then that separation, so then that too then has to go back into everything. So that's also just a stage, because you're right, the consciousness is all things, so it is also the violent movement. Yeah.
I see.
Such a full-on subject, isn't it?
Yes. I see. But the other point I wanted to check in with you though, but prior to your big awakening shift, you still had I guess improvements in the quality of your life along this path, right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you weren't just doing this, slogging it out for nothing. I mean, you were experiencing I guess improved quality or experience of life along the way. No,
I was having some big waves of suffering right up to the end, but generally what I was experiencing more and more was that I was happy in the moment, and I began to care less and less about waking up, because there was like this expansion that was happening that I didn't recognize was expansion, but it meant that what I was really like enjoying the moment. I was really enjoying drinking my tea or doing the gardening or doing very simple things, and that was becoming more and more present. But then there would still be these big waves of difficulty that would come up.
I see. And that didn't happen after 2011.
There can be very difficult conditioning that comes up sometimes, like old conditioning, but not to the extent as prior. But there can be very difficult experiences that come up sometimes, like conditioning and the flow of life, like the things that happen in life, and like old karmas that I haven't properly worked out can come back.
I see.
And I think that there's that little boy in there again, hoping for this place of, it's like a little boy energy, like hoping for this place. So it's like, when I get to this place, nothing bad is going to happen again. It's like really investigate that voice and that energy and see where it's felt in the body. Because that too is illusory, like this imagination of when I get to this place. It's been helpful because it's helped you explore things and do different things, but it's also at some point has to disappear. Like, when I get to this place, like, why is it saying that? And then I know what the answer is. It's because there's like these difficult energies that you want to get rid of. It's understandable, but it's allowing that voice in rather than believing that voice.
Yes, that's a good point. Actually, what that brings up is the little boy's voice is like, it wants to get to this place where things get quote unquote fixed so I can get on with my life, even though I totally know that's the exact opposite of what this point of the point that this is. But somehow, I guess that somehow gets to remain in the back of your mind, even if intellectually you think you've understood it and know that that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah. So just notice if that is a parent's voice. So is it a parent's voice that's coming up that's saying, you have to behave, you have to be a certain way, and you have to then work. Like everything's about work, everything's about doing something for the future and getting on and growing. Just noticing like what is like going deeper and deeper into that thought. And then you could also explore, is the hopelessness in this? If I don't perform for my parents, if I don't get on, am I, like what happens to me? Am I loved? Am I abandoned? Am I rejected? There's great depths in these thoughts that they pass as like, this is a very innocent thought, when am I going to make it to enlightenment? But when you explore it, you can unravel lots of energies that are in the body holding on.
Yes, you're right. Thank you. It's totally a parent's voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I'll have to meditate on more.
Yeah, we're just fascinating. Like this subject is fascinating and endless. It's like it's such an amazing investigation. And when we begin to see it in this light, like I look at my situation now and it's an investigation, so when I'm in difficult situations, because difficult situations are going to arise in life, because that's just the nature, everything grows and then is destroyed, grows and destroyed. So there is difficult situations we have to deal with. It's an investigation, like how is this Lisa character going to manage this? Like what is she going to do now? Like what thoughts is she going to have? What feelings is she going to have? What are other people going to have? Like it's fascinating. And it's getting that curiosity about our experience. Sorry, I struggled saying that word. About our experience, like what is happening now? Rather than this energy that's always looking to the future. Like I must be this, I must be that. I need to get to here in order for this to happen. That's like the education system and parents and, society. Rather than what is happening now.
Did you have to go through a deliberate process of letting each of these things go? Kind of akin to one of the things that I related so much in one of your videos is where you talked about where I guess after the awakening you went, and I'm not sure if you were talking about the big one or earlier ones, but what you had to go through a process of a lot of crying over giving up all of your memory, over letting go of your memories. And that really touched me too, because I realized how attached I am to my memories. And I was wondering, oh gosh, do I have to go through that process of surrendering all the, like individually, all those attachments to all those memories? And and that's totally gonna make me cry if I do that.
There's a good chance you do, but it's different for everybody. There's such depth to this, and there's such depth to experiencing, and the human evolution is endless. So Lisa's ability and Terence's ability to evolve and to change is endless, just like the universe, just like every other species and every other plant and every other being on this planet. So on the human level, it never ends. There's endlessly possibility to explore. But what can happen is there can be a shift from it being you as a character that's experiencing to this no thing that's experiencing, this emptiness that's experiencing with that love side, the I am.
Would you say you were only able to surrender those memories after you had some initial glimpse experiences? Because if you're fully identified as the character, there's no way you're going to give up those memories.
Yeah, and I would say that also the psychology, so working on my psychology only worked in conjunction with, for me, with non-duality and with having awakenings and seeing an impersonality to it all. Like for me, it had to have an impersonality for me to be able to step back and to really change and explore and admit things. Like admitting the shadow, I'm not sure if you've done that yet. That's like really intense. Like, I don't know how people do that when they believe the shadow is themselves. Like I went through one process of having to admit that I could be the worst person in the whole universe. you know, like omitting certain circumstances, and I could, you know, be the monster in the story. That certain circumstances occurred, you know, so there's all different things that arise in the process. Yeah.
I see.
Nice.
Well,
Well, thank you for calling in. I really enjoyed all your questions.
Thank you so
Karen.
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really appreciate being able to speak with you.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and all the best with everything. Lots of love.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.